When I was in high school, my friends and I were all in a reading club together. A few years after we graduated, the four of us were invited back to chaperone the students during the club's annual camping trip. We joined my advisor, her infant son, her husband, and a few of his friends, who served as our security guards, and a dozen high school students for a 3-day weekend trip. The year I chaperoned was the first time the trip was held at Camp Timberline because the place we usually went, Camp Mokolea, was booked. Those of you who know Oahu know that Camp Mokolea has more than its fair share of spooky stories. Unlike the usual campsite, we all stayed in one huge 2-story cabin instead of 2 smaller cabins. The main floor of the cabin held the main living area and kitchen, and the upstairs had many bedrooms. We arrived for a 3-day weekend and had a blast the first 2 days, Friday and Saturday. We were due to go home on Sunday, so it was tradition that the night before was ghost story night. Everyone gathered in the main room to listen to and tell their favorite stories. This being Hawaii, almost everyone had an eerie experience to share. Around midnight, our advisor sent everyone to bed. It had been my group of friends' tradition to pull an all-nighter to play cards and bullshit the night before we had to go home from an event. We were in a lot of clubs together, so that's what we did. Slowly, the noise in the house died down, and eventually, we were the only ones awake. Several times while we played cards, one person or another would notice movement outside the room in the hallway, but we figured it was because we had been spooked by the stories. By 3 a.m. we were all exhausted, so we said our good nights and went to bed. The next morning, I walked downstairs to get breakfast. The students were still upstairs packing. My best friend Travis was in the kitchen speaking urgently to our advisor. The two of them share a special connection because they both are, at the risk of sounding corny, a little psychic. They both looked tired and pale. I asked what was wrong. This is what they told me, and recounting it still gives me chills. That night, as soon as he had gone to bed, Travis dreamt of an old woman. He couldn't describe her features, but he sensed that she was malevolent. He kept saying that she felt very, very evil. In his dream, the witch was crouched in the upstairs hallway of the cabin, outside of our advisor's room. He saw that she was leaning over and saying something, but he could not make out the words. In his dream, he went closer and saw that she was calling to the baby, my advisor's son. The baby and his parents were sleeping on sleeping bags on the floor. He desperately tried to stop her, but he was powerless, which alarmed him because he is a lucid dreamer. When he woke up that morning, he immediately found our advisor and told her about his dream. She was silent for a while after he finished. Then she told him about her night. Her son usually slept through the night, but that night, her son kept waking up in the middle of the night to crawl toward the door. The incident was relayed to the other adults. One of the older chaperones, who was of native Hawaiian descent, advised that everyone should be salted before we left the campgrounds that day. In Hawaiian tradition, salt is used to cleanse people places of evil spirits. Everyone was salted before getting into their vehicles, and were instructed to salt again before entering their homes. As far as I know, the club never went back to those campgrounds.